Hi.
Hello.
There seem to be a rather large number of versions in the Dropbox. Seems to be one with your initials at the end of it, I think, Richard.
Yeah, I was making some changes when Nigel uploaded the one that's just NRS, and so I merged the two sets of changes together. I did have to accept quite a few of the earlier changes at that point, but I'm not sure they were really serving any purpose. And I just put in an index because I was getting lost. Some documents got so complicated.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Hello, we band of brothers. I think we're a bit reduced in numbers. I don't know. I have had apologies from a couple of people, but
I'd have to go at 11 as well.
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Anyway, we can have a quick catch up. Thanks, Richard. I noticed you made some changes. You seem to always be making your changes about 1:30 in the morning. That's heroic.
Yeah, my copious spare time. Yeah,
That's how it works, isn't it? Yeah, I'd had a go at it yesterday as well. So, and of course, I wasn't on the back end of the call last week, but I'm assuming that we're sticking with the general format of trying to kind of get slightly more granular recommendations. In the meantime, the world seems to be kind of converging on some of the broad recommendations we'll want to be making as well. I noticed the FAIR principles in the Royal Society statement were the Academy of Sciences statement, the G7, which I popped in the Dropbox as well. I guess it'd be good to try and just look at where we are in terms of the development of the whole thing. So I've gone through sections 8.1 and 8.2, trying to turn them into this slightly more recommendation centric. And I noticed that you added some material, Richard, as well. I also integrated some of the skills work that Ian had dropped in there. Richard, you just want to say what you had done as well? Yeah.
Well, I was partly I was just providing a table of contents, so I was getting lost. But the other thing I was doing was adding in. We talked at I don't know whether it was before you'd left, but we talked about moving some of the stuff from 8.2 into 8.1 and into leaving the kind of COVID experience into the subheadings in 8.1 into findability and accessibility and things like that. So I just started doing that, which unfortunately didn't seem to be possible to directly extract any text from 8.2. So it's largely written. There's a lot of it written from scratch, unfortunately. But yeah. Anyway, so I talked a bit about the sources of data and how much metadata is available for them for the findability and permanent identifiers. Some stuff I didn't realize actually. The URIs that you get from Open Data Scotland, I thought were identifiers that you could use, that they have dates mangled into them. And I thought that meant that they were from a specific date time and they didn't get updated if you were downloading that specific thing. But actually, that's not true. They just ignore the date and download the latest version. So
okay.
So anyway, I mean, I was trying to see how that fitted in with the stories that we put in about what findability and accessibility and things are. But I didn't get as far through it as I'd hoped.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're hoping to, I think, really break the back of this in the next couple of weeks. I mean, it is definitely getting into a more structured shape, and whether we have to kind of reboil it down, for the purposes of a degree of precision when we've got the whole thing in place. Yeah, but I mean, I think again, I mean, also mindful of what Valerie was saying about making this, whilst we're drawing a lot on the UK experience, kind of pointing out to the wider challenges across, any modelling enterprise, any infectious diseases response, not just the UK one from which you're drawing so much experience. So there is the FAIR principles now in 8.1 have really kind of, I think, given the way that they're being referenced as well by a lot in the broader community, I think everybody's recognizing, oh, aren't they a good idea? And it's just a shame they're perhaps not more widely adopted. I mean, the fact is it's a lot of work to curate and manage to those principles. And I think that's something we need to kind of really emphasize in the paper, that this doesn't just happen, that the modelling is in some sense always going to be somewhat more attractive to people, I think, than some of the more mundane data curation. But without that ecosystem in place, you don't get quality data. So I think those explorations in section 8.1 work. I mean, lots of recommendations to make.
I think there's a
Yeah,
there's a stark difference now. I started looking at it in detail between data.gov.uk and Open Data Scotland. I mean, really, really stark in terms of how they satisfy any standards that you might wish, which I guess I hadn't fully appreciated myself before I started kind of drilling into how you find the metadata and,
And what would you? I mean, can I just ask you to elaborate that a bit? Because I think that's a really interesting observation. Yeah.
So data.gov.uk, as far as I can tell, provides metadata in the sense that it provides a very long free text description of what's going on. But it's basically just one enormous page with lots of repetition that broadly describes in human readable terms what might be happening. Open Data Scotland, on the other hand, provides strictly versioned metadata with descriptors of both the sources of the data and the columns and the meanings of the columns, and where those columns have their own vocabulary, then it refers to versions of those vocabularies, which then have their own metadata about the columns of the vocabularies, and so on, back as far as you can go into. It's
I think that would be a great thing to try and pull out, because I mean, it is in more in sorrow than in anger that when we were kicking off data.gov.uk back in the day, those precepts, those principles around really verbose metadata were kind of laid down, but of course we noticed early on that not just at the national level, but even local government, where they were trying to put their data up in some of these open repositories, had all sorts of variations as to what they thought metadata meant for their structured data. I mean, sometimes it wasn't, it was just it wasn't even machine read, it was just PDFs, or it was some kind of spreadsheet file, CSV file, or whatever. So there was already local variation, but I think there is, as you say, the resort back to thinking that I've given a verbal description, that's enough. It's nothing close to what you would really want to see for genuine machine interoperability. So yeah, that will be a nice contrast point, actually, without making too much out of it. But I think it's a really interesting thing to deliberate. Yeah, from that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think we can make more of that. I guess just then the question, because we don't have the modelers here, especially today, just to reflect on 8.2. I mean, I think 8.1 we can, particularly if we kind of try and draw in where we compare and contrast. What do you think that would be best done, by the way, then, Richard? For example, to reflect some of those differences and where they haven't been helpful, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the right answer to that. I mean, I think the from the point of view of the recommendations, though, then at least at that point, it's possible to say that the Open Data Scotland model is one that should be adopted and expanded more than perhaps the data.gov.uk one, even though both provide, similar data sets.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's great to say that. Yeah, open. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say for the UK, for the data.gov.uk stuff is that it at least has the benefit of being reasonably current and fast moving. I suppose the Scottish data is as well, is it? It's all
absolutely
directly now. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So the data is as far as I can tell fully up to date. But if you, just for instance, just to give you an idea of what it actually looks like, if you haven't seen it, this is one of the data sets here, a preview of one of the data sets. And then halfway down that page, there's a data dictionary. And then,
are you trying to share your screen?
Oh, sorry, I was put a link in. I can share.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. No, that's all right. No, let me do. No, that's better.
No, it's here. So, this is just, I just clicked on this at random, but here's a preview table of some of the data, and then there's a data dictionary, and then SetsQF has qualifier information, and that itself is then a table with a data dictionary, and
who's maintaining all of that as a matter of
I have no idea. Somebody very obsessive. And I say that in a good way.
No. That's I don't think I'd fully appreciated that was such a stark difference.
Yeah. So
that's one of the big. That's one of the really big features is that qualifiers, the semantics of the labels is often completely missing in these. It's just meant to be a piece of implicit knowledge that you have. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Good. Well, that would be a good recommendation. Yeah. Dennis, had you seen this kind of data at this kind of grain size before from Scotland? Sorry, you're muted. Yeah.
Sorry, I am. No, I'm not.
It's just striking that it is that much more full.
No, I don't do any sort of day-to-day modelling, so I'm not.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not a consumer of this.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah. Hi, Lorenzo.
Be a better person to ask who's just popped up.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, just arrived in the nick of time. Yeah. Hi, Lorenzo.
Hi, good morning.
We're just reflecting on where the papers got to. We were just comparing the data assets in data.gov.uk, if you like, the coronavirus dashboard, and the Scottish equivalent, which is full of explicit, wonderful, rich metadata and vocabulary definitions. And I hadn't quite appreciated there was such a stark difference between the surrounding contextual information you get with the Scottish data sets.
Neither did I. I don't think I ever directly interacted with the Scottish data because it.
Did you just catch a sight of the shared screen that Richard was showing us?
No, I just opened my eyes.
Pull it up again.
No,
put it up again. Look, it's okay. Just take us through okay. So this is the vaccine.
Yeah. So this is the vaccination data. So if I just go back, these are the data sets here, and then I just clicked on the vaccination data, and then this gives additional information about the vaccination data sets. But then if you explore one of those, you get into the daily trend of vaccinations. You get a preview of the data. But then down here is a version data dictionary, and then there are metadata about the columns in the data dictionary, which then provides information about the qualifiers, saying that there's a break in the time series at this point and so on, with metadata about that metadata dictionary, and so on back. It's turtles all the way down or whatever.
Yeah, that's remarkable and heavily self-recursive.
Yeah.
But it's nice. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you could spend your day lost in a world of metadata. But to be fair, there are occasions when you really will want to reach for that. In certain contexts, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I don't remember the UK data being in any way. The English data being in any way at that level.
It's not. It's essentially.
No, there is some context in the vaccination data.
Yeah.
But what I typically just get the data from as a file that puts together lots of different data streams, because SPI-AM has worked quite a lot in order to achieve that.
Sure.
But during the times like Christmas break, when this file was not coming through, I just went to the publicly available data, and in itself it's not bad in the sense that it's only kind of 2 days late compared to the other data stream we have. But yes, I mean, I simply download the data stream I'm interested in, and that's it. I haven't really searched or understood much about the metadata around it.
Yeah. And it'll be, I think it'll be a very interesting kind of compare and contrast example for us as we think about what we want to encourage people to do in terms of, curating and depositing data in the future. So we just reflected actually on on the major sections of the paper on 8.1, which we think actually the FAIR principles now are getting quite a lot of attention from various of the review reports coming out. And the latest one was the Royal Society as part of the Joint Academies of Science yesterday, telling G7 that everybody should take these things seriously, which is all good stuff. So we think that's a good organizational set of precepts for that part of the paper. What they are, what the challenges and what the recommendations might be. We're back onto the 8.2, which of course is all around the issue of data use in models. And I still think I think convinced that this needs to be a core part, and it's just working through now how, whether it's obvious what the recommendations are that can pop out from there, as well as the description of how data was used. And I think at one stage we were wondering whether or not there were clear, clear recommendations, say from section 822, which is some of the stuff that you wrote about, Lorenzo. I mean, what does it amount to be a recommendation? What are the things we could pick out from that experience that amounts to maybe a recommendation is too strong, but I mean something that operationalizes a learning from that. And 8.3 similar. Well, we've got the lessons learned then, but again as recommendations. Yeah.
I apologize. I wasn't feeling great in the past few days, and I had quite a few deadlines, so I didn't do much. I didn't do anything really for this week. Right. Is there anything specific?
Well, I guess in looking at 8.2, what I'm keen to understand is how we've got the sections which reference the way that the modelling has proceeded and used data in the current pandemic. Just very generally, we've referenced in 8.2.1 availability of core data, and then the big chunk is around lessons learned in 8.2.3. And then the kind of data we might like in the future, and because that ought to put some constraints around what we attempt to collect and how we deposit that. And we've got a big list of bullet points and also some tabular information that I think at one stage maybe Glenn or Ben were thinking they could help tabulate for us in terms of missing, the data that was missing.
Yeah, like Lorenzo, it's been a bit of a week, so I haven't actually done what I said I would do, which was.
But is that a sensible thing to try and do? Do you think that? I think it would be a sensible thing to do if we could. Yep. Yeah,
I mean, I thought it's a sensible thing to try, and then we can try and see whether it is a sensible thing to include. No doubt, whatever I come up with will be shot. There'll be holes in it, but
no, that's okay. That's okay.
And the other thing was that I was going to, the plan I think was to combine that, put that into section 8.3.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like we've still got a reasonable amount of refactoring to do on 8.2 and 8.3. That's reasonable. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Having gotten 8.1 into something like a format, then we can all kind of get behind.
Because I think last week there was even a discussion of whether we needed 8.2 at all, and whether those elements would just be incorporated into other sections as kind of evidence.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to see if we could look at 8.2 and if there was a chance for Lorenzo or perhaps Jasmine, I don't know if you've got a minute, to kind of pull out recommendations. I mean, you know, you can, otherwise, if you redistribute them, which is I suppose possible, we don't need to do that with some care, because I think there's some quite useful insights in there that we wouldn't want to lose. What it does is it makes the, I think, chapter more authentic with respect to the modelers have been involved. It's not just a bunch of data engineers or data scientists who want the world to be more perfect than it is, but actually there's real reference back to what the modeling has done and has learned. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, I think just looking at the titles of the 8.2 subsections, the data availability and data in the current pandemic might perhaps be folded in elsewhere, and the data and leaving essentially 8.2 as the data and models.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure how that fits in terms of merging it with 8.3. But I think that the first, the data engineering, I think, kind of works. And then we have, well, how does that interact with epidemiology? And then how do we generate platforms for that? What other data do we need? What policy should we have? What skills do we need?
And that's the story, isn't it? Yeah, that is the story. Yeah. So there's a little bit of, I think we felt for a while, there's a little bit of a kind of a discontinuity at this point. You feel like you're reading about something else. So maybe folding it in is an option. So when it was discussed last week, we didn't get to a resolved position on that. I think it's just a matter of, I mean, is it going to be straightforward to take the first two sections and of 8.2 and find a place for some of that material?
I mean, going into 8.1.1, 8.1.2, I've managed to take some of the material out, although I've had to restructure it quite a bit. I don't think it's impossible, but it really just requires going through it bit by bit and then going back to it. I haven't deleted any of 8.2. I basically feel like it would involve going back to it after we finished 8.1 and just seeing what's now redundant.
Yeah. So how do you feel we're doing on 8.1? I mean, I feel that's starting to kind of move into reasonable shape. Do you, in terms of the major concerns and categories, right?
I think it works for me, but other people should. I mean, I've been writing it, so.
Yeah, no, we've both been looking at that. Yeah. Well, I'm taking silent for a cent at that stage. I think we just do need to kind of, then in that case, really, it's how do we apportion the work on the remaining two sections? Because actually, funny enough, I think policies and skills will be relatively easy to kind of turn into a recommendation-based format on where we are. I think the issue on life cycles and models, platforms need to be generalized out and not just all about open safely, but we can generalize that out, I think, quite well. It's what we do with 8.2 at this point, because as I say, I'm keen that we don't lose contact with the modeling experience. And if Lorenzo, what's your thought on how this would? Is it the case that 8.3, which is all around lessons learned, 8.2.3 is the important stuff and data for future academics, and then we can redistribute the other actual experience of the current pandemic in the earlier sections? Would that work, or do you think it makes sense to keep it separate at this point and then look at it later?
I would probably need to kind of reread it in order to have a detailed opinion.
Yeah, okay.
Because I also kind of forgot completely from one week to the next. But well, at the moment, it sounds like this is what it was really divided into. This is what happened. These are the bad things that happened, and then these are the recommendation. And you can certainly rearrange the material by saying this is an example of something that happened, which reveals a challenge that should be sorted out, and you can just merge the three together. I don't know whether this was the question you were asking.
Well, I'm just trying to think how we refactor 8.2 really, and I think I just want to be clear that we give people perhaps some, if they could find the time to do one of the tasks on this. So if I was to come back to Glenn's offer to take the was it the section 8.2.4, yeah, data availability, and were you trying to, would you keep that within the 8.2 section or try and interleave it into 8.3?
No, I was trying to interleave it into 8.3, as you know, the idea being that we've got 8.2, which is like COVID and all the things that happen with COVID, and then 8.3 goes back to trying to be more generic.
Yeah. And so the data availability for future pandemics, you'd pull some of that forward, into. I mean, would it be too much to ask you to have a go at that? So what we do is we take the current version of the document and just allocate subsections for us to have a go at refactoring, and then when we reconvene, we look at reintegrating those elements. Would that be possible for you to do that?
Yeah, like I said, I intended to do it for the last week, but it's just been a crazy week. So
is it reasonable to think you could in the coming week or the coming?
Yeah, the coming week looks a lot better. So.
All right, and then in that case, Lorenzo, would you be able to look at 8.2, the earlier sections, and just think about what if you could recommendize them? You know, turn that experience into some just relatively crisp recommendations, and they might, you know, as you look at what occurs to you about what you've learned from the process.
Yes, I can try. I would struggle to do it by next week.
Yeah, okay.
Because I have other 3 deadlines coming up, and I wanted to rest at least one day.
Of course.
After a year.
So
I don't promise I can do anything by next Thursday, but certainly I can give it a go. It shouldn't be difficult. And
no, I wouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think it's just your eye trying to find the find the recommendation points, even if it's not explicitly there in the text. You just say, "Oh, we mustn't forget this point." Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Is it more? How do I say that? Is it more agile if I coordinate with Glenn directly?
Yeah, that would be great.
On that.
That would be great.
Glenn, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, broadly speaking, I was just going to take out 8.2.4. At least at the moment, that was my first stab.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds good. My question is just whether once you kind of try to do your
absolutely. No, I'm happy to.
If you try to kind of once you kind of try to tackle your rearranging and redrafting the material, you can kind of drop me a line with a task. It's probably the easiest thing to do.
Okay.
Is that useful?
I'm happy to, I'm happy to kind of then progress on the policy and institutions piece. The platforms, just to kind of turn them into our new format. The platforms piece is, let's say, a bit centric around open safety. Then we have the Scottish COVID-19 Response Consortium, which is important to kind of promote. I think as a piece of development there, kind of blends in some of that stuff will blend into the establishment, I think, of new data institutions. Richard, what's happening in that space? I mean, where have things gotten to in terms of setting up structures to hold this data and take it forward?
From the point of view of our data pipeline, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's all in place now. I mean, the software is still pretty dodgy, but the store and everything are in place. The STFC have now have that up and running, and we can store the data alongside the metadata through our registry now if you have suitable permissions to upload data. Yeah, so that's all up and running, and we're now adapting the system to make it a little bit more user friendly, essentially. that it's been a little bit hard to engage with so far. So we're trying to simplify the process of actually setting up registries and this kind of thing to make it more accessible to civilians.
Is there any text you could throw in on that? I mean, I know we're still inflating this chapter rather than kind of boiling it down again to its to the key.
There isn't anything that we've already written. I mean, it's what we've done so far has mostly been slides.
Okay.
So there's not so it doesn't really lend itself to large chunks of text. To be honest, I'd rather continue to work on 8.1 and then.
Yeah,
and then
I think if we get that right, that'll be a very good. I mean, in a way, if we get that right, that'll be a core of the.
And then we can, you know, that section can have something on open, the latest section can have something on Open Safely, something on our data pipeline, by which time we will have voted on a name for it. At the moment, it still doesn't have a finalized name. The minor detail, but probably important from the point of view of the publication. And also we'll know whether or not Weld has been funded.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Right.
Maybe this isn't helpful, but I'm wondering whether one option might be to have 8.2 as the opening section, which kind of essentially lays out all the issues that have been experiencing COVID, and then the rest of the paper then kind of shows how
how a program, how the program of
the only problem
of fair principles properly adopted and deployed could be an answer to some of this. What that actually means. That's
the only problem is you might lose some of the more data people by not jumping straight in. I guess that's the danger.
Yeah, well, you could do some signposting at the outset. I mean, that's an interesting thought. I mean, I think we need to kind of at some point take pause and just look at the material we've got and kind of think whether a reordering would really work. Min, could I just ask you, where is the visualization work? How's that work proceeding?
I think we more or less agree we're going to produce a separate chapter, and so we'll be adding the challenges which are outlined in the challenging document, merge with the existing work. The idea was to demonstrate how those challenges are related to the data. In terms of how the data should be visualized, and through the modeling process can be met potentially. And actually, what I try to raise my hand to comments on, maybe for the data chapter, I'm just going to make a suggestion and on my observation. And thanks, Nigel, for sending this the G7 recommendation. And in some way, I feel that one major component or one major recommendation is missing. Is we tend to say, here we're going to have an infrastructure, we're going to put the data there, data will be fair accessed. And then we say we need to improve people's skill for using the data and do that. To me, that recommendation sounds a bit too much like sort of 30 years ago, we teach students to say, hey, should put the library organize all the information, library information in some way, and then the students should learn how to reading those sort of index books and go to browsing the library. But we didn't say one thing, is now we could have a lot of tools available to accompany the data infrastructure, such as search, such as data analysis, data visualization. If those tools are there, then suddenly we realize we actually don't need that much training on the skill, just like all those teenagers coming in can use the search engine straight away without too much teaching. What we're missing is that also is, in my view, is one of the major problems of the open data program. Quite often we focus too much on the storage, but we didn't think about the tools to make people's job easier to access the data. And I read the statistics on the biology side. Apparently in EU, which was compulsory to keep all the biological projects data available in public domain, some people a few years ago had the estimation 97% of data were never downloaded by anyone. And in my view, there's just not two there. The reading data is too expensive to most people. And if there are common the search engine, in my view, is almost essential in some way. And if we have all the data in some way to be accompanied by standard data visualization tool, which is the second standard way can be done. The third way, slightly tricky, is to be accompanied by analytical tools. And that, because all the analytical tools potentially can be subjective to introduce the subjectivity on what conclusion you would like to draw. While the data visualization and the search are usually relatively neutral without too much conclusions in it. And whether this part should be part of recommendation to say, if we have that, we need to bridge the gap between the scale and the amount of data, or the time, actually, the cost and the scale, with providing more tools.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good point you make. I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. So I'm gonna suggest the following kind of way to proceed. I think that if you'd allow, perhaps let's not start our tasks until the. I'd like to do a bit more refactoring on the version that Richard had updated. So turn what we've got into my interpretation of slightly more fleshed out text in the back end, and also the recommendation elements. And then we will look at, then we can allocate blocks of the text for people to refactor if they want to reposition stuff. So if you would give, if we sort of say that Glenn, for example, working with Lorenzo, would take a look at this, say, well, I'm going to release a version to take a look at in 24 hours, something like that. I mean, do you need to get onto it now? Would you have the best opportunity to get onto it right now, Glenn?
I don't really, to be honest.
No, good. So that's not going to knock any people out if we take a little bit more time to just kind of do some because I've got time to do that, and I think it'd be quite useful to just try and smooth some of the text we've got, and then think about reordering in the various ways. I think if you working with Lorenzo can look at how there's some folding in of various elements. I don't know about moving it to the front end, that might be a bit too radical, but moving some of those insights in the early sections of 8.2 into the 8.1 sections could be really quite powerful. I think it would be, you really then almost begin to make the organizational principle, the FAIR principles, understood more in more granularity against the experience of modeling. And I think the institutions, the platforms, and the skills we can, we know what we want to say. It's not so difficult to expand that. And then Richard, perhaps if you could take a look at your leisure at putting some of these really good observations in about differences between actually these flagship projects, which are very different, it turns out, in the way they're being implemented. And it will be really, I think, quite a surprise to people to realise just what the variation is.
I think that Open Data Scotland has actually changed a lot over the last year. I mean, when we started accessing it 9 months ago or something, it was much cruder than that. I mean, I notice now you can actually pass SQL queries into the system to do searches of the individual tables and joins and stuff like that. It's all very sophisticated.
Be fascinated to know how that's happened. Yeah, but what the locus for that is. And again, it's interesting that just in the devolved administrations, you see this variation, all committed to, all with their NHS variants, all with some of the same requirements, but servicing them in very different ways. Of course, the question is, this is an obvious question, does the epidemiological modelling in Scotland fall under the ambit of SPI? I mean, how does that modelling get done? Or are they all part of the same core capability in SPI-M and SAGE, or are those already
there's some groups that are in SPI-M and feed into SAGE, but the majority, I would say, in Scotland that I'm aware of don't actually.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Right. So in terms of Ben said, would we allocate something for him to do? What does that make sense from your perspective, Richard, for Ben? Would the platforms be the stuff for him to look at?
I don't know. Sorry, I haven't thought about Ben. I'm completely open to suggestions about that. I wouldn't have said
Ben was kind of more involved in 8.3 originally, but perhaps, at least for the time being, I mean, one option you were saying that 8.1 could do with a sort of fresh pair of eyes, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that might be really useful to have somebody look over the first couple of sections of 8.1 after you've revisited them to see whether somebody else thinks that what's written there makes sense.
Okay.
Because I've been typing stuff fairly freely, and you have too, and so having somebody check over that would probably be a good thing.
Okay. All right. Are we going to attempt to get together next week? I couldn't just remember whether we'd said that we'd pause it or we would meet on the 7th. Is it the 7th? Yeah. Are people able to make next?
I would personally struggle.
Yeah.
There is an ongoing conference. I'm not actually talking that morning, but if I were not in meetings, I would probably I don't work through my deadlines or attend a conference I'm speaking at the day before.
Yeah, I can't actually make it because I am speaking, I think, at this time, I think.
Same conference?
The
AMC.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, Nigel, putting on a sort of editorial hat, do we have a sort of roadmap to a belated deadline?
Yeah, we've got to, haven't we, really? Because there'll be no halting condition otherwise.
You know, I mean, we set the, I mean, background, we set the deadline as being yesterday. I think we got one paper in on the deadline. So
good for them.
So in a way, I suggest that for me implies that we got the deadline right in a way, because you realise everyone's very busy with lots of things, but unless you sort of have some kind of deadline, it's not going to happen. So what we're hoping is that the example of someone meeting the deadline will encourage others to at least set a fair.
Which one was that, as a matter of interest? Joe,
policy.
Policy. Okay, yeah. I thought they looked.
I'm going to make a folder of submitted papers as they go in, so that people can look at can look at them. So, and I think there are several. I mean, well, including this one, that are well on the way. It's just a question of how long it's going to take them to cross the T's and dot the I's.
Yeah, the danger is that we'll spend, if we give ourselves so much more time, we'll spend our times kind of endlessly arguing about where stuff could go. So
well, I mean, I think I think it's a very interesting discussion. I'm sure you can think, if we left it just open, I'm sure you'll keep on coming up with new ideas and improving it. But I think at some point you have to.
Well, we're not going to get this
in reasonable shape, and after all, you may well get a chance to get any small things or possibly bigger things right once you've gone through refereeing. If the referees say they don't like the shape of the paper or call you to justify it, you may get a second bite at the cherry. But I think do you think getting something in April is realistic?
In April, yes. Yes, I think it probably could be, but I think it would be at the back end of April, frankly.
So I mean, my sort of broad sort of strategic suggestion would be if we're taking a week off, that we come back in a fortnight with a mindset that things should be falling into place at that point.
Yeah.
Because if you can agree, if in mid-April you can sort of agree you've more or less got the structure right, you can send individuals off to finalize over another week, and then probably a final week for the real sort of.
No, I think you're right.
Polishing.
Does that seem plausible to people? I think that's I think. Really helpful advice, Dennis. I think it is.
That'd be great. I mean, I think I'll be saying much the same thing to several other papers, with a hope that we really might get most of them in by the end of April.
Right. Okay. So that would mean yeah.
Well,
Beginning again on the 15th.
I think it's sorry. I'm absolutely not dictating things here, Nigel. You know, you have to think about it, and if you think some slightly different schedule makes better sense, you know.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to find is also a way of sequencing what we do next, so that we can hand over control. There aren't too many of us trampling over the other people's work at this point. So reasonably allocate periods of time where we can separately work on different parts, but collectively work on the whole thing. So if I undertake to try and regularize what we have following today's discussion, and then we have some of this allocation, the Glenn working with Lorenzo on 8.2, Richard looking again at 8.1 with perhaps Ben helping. Yeah, in 2 weeks we can come together, and I think it will then depend what we've got in some of the later sections. But again, I think the material's less controversial in a certain sense, the skill stuff. I think Min made a really interesting point about skills and tools. I think that's really quite helpful. Min, if you could have a look at that section, that would be very helpful. I mean, I think that I think combining these two facets could be quite an interesting point you make, that as you provide more power tools, the requirement for people to be able to, the skills people require just change. You're not requiring them to do all this low level bolting together of components. And we know that a lot in software engineering, don't we? Just how the barrier to entry can be so high that the ultimate sort of source data is never used. I mean, that's quite chilling fact that I think data has a long tail, by the way. I think invariably some data is much more heavily used, and being able to spot that and understand that's quite important. So
perhaps also for the discussion, the sort of whole question of uptake and how we promote these things, because there is a danger that we're just saying we recommend that everyone should do this, but how that gets promulgated. And
it's interesting though that the projects clearly are online that have gone considerable distance along this route, and again, it's just trying to intercept those developments with what the modelers find it straightforward and easy to get hold of, and understanding that, of course, in the press of events, they need what they can get. And so I think the idea of this idea of a continuous infectious diseases dashboard, I mean, there should never be a situation where we don't have some of these live streams of data for quite a broad range of infectious disease conditions. Why wouldn't we? I mean, we can collect, what is the overhead of collecting routinely this data? And that might be the question. People say you have no idea what it's costing to pull all of this coronavirus data together. Why would we ever do it for flu or chicken pox or whatever? You know, I have no idea.
I mean, I think the one thing is, once the main problem this time is we don't seem to have any infrastructure readily. If we have an existing infrastructure for something, we actually can quite quickly convert it or duplicate it and then change it to make it for use for other things. I think that as a country, we at least need one. And in fact, a few years ago, I even said that we need infrastructure for cybersecurity, and if we had one like that, it could easily be converted into the scenario which we have, because the amount of data in cybersecurity would be 10 times, 100 times more than the pandemic. So I think we just don't have that kind of the way we can do things more efficiently. And in terms of what Nigel's suggestion, so I'm going to draft some text, maybe give it to the next meeting, then you can decide where you want this text to go, this kind of comments to go to, whether go to ecosystem or go to platform, or whether go to skill section.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I think then, well then, in that case, I'm going to beg myself a bit more of a grace and give me to the end of tomorrow. Then I'll send around a version. I'll send around an email that has just summarised our our discussion today around the notion of a deadline, end of April, some delegation to groups of us to look at different sections using the reference document that will be that I'll put in the Dropbox kind of for the end of tomorrow as the thing we work from. Okay, does that seem reasonable? Next steps. Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Thank you, and Lorenzo. Thank you for staying with us as well.
No, apologies, I haven't
You
really.
sound like you've got a cold. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was a bit rough, so I just woke up really before the meeting, trying to catch up.
Well, okay. I think we've done as much as we can usefully at this point. Is that right? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. 10:30 2 weeks time. Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.